everyone, and welcome to the February Talk and SD Forum's Distinguished Speaker Series, co-hosted by the Computer History Museum, the San Francisco Bay chapter of the ACM, and the Chinese Software Professionals Association. I'm Sanford Rockowitz, co-chair along with Bibo White of the series. The Distinguished Speaker Series presents people whose leadership and creativity have advanced the state of the art of software development, or who have helped us understand the role of software in the larger society. And it presents these people speaking on topics of current interest. SD Forum, as most of you know, is an organization of some 2,000 software professionals. And our purpose, simply put, is to keep all of you up to date with and in touch with what's happening in the software industry. Laura Merling is our executive director, and she's going to say a few more words about the organization in general and about Member Appreciation Day, which is coming up tomorrow.
Yes, thank you, Sandy. Thank you everyone for coming. Wonderful introduction there of SD Forum, who we are and what we do. As they said, we're about 2,000 people. It includes individuals as well as company memberships. So there's some startup members and some larger. There's company memberships ranging from like 5 to 20 people as well. The primary purpose is to provide education. So there's about 20 to 25 events every month, ranging in topics from security to international software to Java and you name it, and soon to be a variety of other SIGs. So keep an eye out. If you ever want to start a SIG or volunteer for any events or programs, please feel free to email myself or Barbara Cass. So I'm Laura at stforum.org and Barbara is Barbara at stforum.org. In terms of other things coming up, one of the events that we have this month is Member Appreciation Month. So what we've done is in each event this month or each meeting we've given away either software, jackets, fleeces, you name it. But tomorrow actually is Member Appreciation Month, just to kind of say thank you for being a part of the organization. And part of that is one of the recent announcements that we made was a discount program at Borders. So Borders gave us a corporate discount of 20% off of books and programming books, technology and business books, depending on which Borders you go to. Otherwise, it's everything, but don't tell anybody. Don't go to the Palo Alto one because they won't give you the discount. Go to any other store and you get it. I think apparently a whole bunch of people swarmed the Palo Alto store, so they got panicked. So tomorrow at the Sunnyvale Borders, what we're doing is all day long you'll get 20% off of everything instead of just books. You'll get it off CDs, DVDs, books, etc. Food, if you want to buy munchies and stuff like that. And then in the evening from 3 to 6 p.m., we're actually hosting a wine and cheese little shindig, and it's actually sponsored by Microsoft. So they've provided all the wine and cheese for tomorrow evening. We'll be doing some raffles for various things. In addition, those of you that are members, how many of you are members? Okay, the person sitting closest to you that is not a member, refer them. Become good friends and refer them, because whoever refers the most members this month will actually win an Xbox. So if you don't have one, you have a chance to get one. So that's the types of stuff we're doing, and I just want to say thank you all for coming, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow at Membership Day. If you are not a member, you can feel free to go and become a member. So join us for wine and cheese tomorrow in Sunnyvale. Thanks. Sorry, Sandy, long-winded.
One thing I want to clarify, because there has been some confusion about, originally we had thought that the Borders discount was going to be available at all stores, and now I guess it's just Sunnyvale, or?
So there's a little secret that so it's only supposed to be so it started out as a corporate discount, and then they got a little freaked out because everybody swarmed on them all on the same day. So they then said it's only at the Sunnyvale store and only on technology and business books.
Right.
But people have been known to use it at other stores, so as long as you have that number on the back of your membership
So the key thing is people can get a sticker.
Yes.
And that says, you get the sticker at, are there ones available outside now?
Yeah, we probably have some out
there should
now.
They should generally be available at any SD Forum event.
Tomorrow.
Or you can come tomorrow, and you'll get this Borders sticker that's applied to your SD Forum membership card. And this tells boarders that you are eligible for SD Forum's discount.
Yeah, and you actually have to show that it's actually like an account number. So you have to show the account number attached to your membership card. That's what we're looking for. It has to be valid.
And I think what had been happening is people have been going to some stores and saying, can we get this discount? And just saying, I'm an SD Forum, there was no number. Is that what the problem was?
Exactly, and so
Okay.
people are like, well, what do you mean? So you can try it at other stores. It's been known to work, even though it's only 50 better.
And
So that's the secret.
Thanks, Laura. And to those of you who have tried to use the discount at other stores and run into some issues, very much apologize. And hopefully we'll get this worked out a little better. The other thing that Laura did not mention about that's happening tomorrow is that many of you have asked for access to the video and audio recording of these talks. And we still haven't worked through how best to do it. There are a number of logistical issues here. But as an interim step, we have created a special edition CD with audio from 5 or 6 of the talks. And for the first 100 members attending tomorrow's Members Appreciation Day at Borders, they will receive a free copy of the CD.
And you guys are the only ones that know that, by the way.
Is that from 3 to 6?
From 3 to 6 at Borders in Sunnyvale.
Yeah, Sandy, the first 100 people starting at 3 p.m. during the wine and cheese.
Right. Don't show up there at 9 a.m. They won't know what. We'll be back in the same, yeah. Okay.
Now, do you have any secrets for finding parking at that Borders?
The best.
No, I wish we could.
Yeah. Well, before we get to tonight's talk, I'd like to say a few words about next month's event. On March 18, our speaker will be Bill Coleman, speaking on the topic, The Next Big Thing. Coleman was founding CEO of BEA, a company whose name is synonymous with enterprise middleware, and the fastest growing software company ever to reach $1 billion in annual revenues. In fact, Bill Coleman is the B of BEA, and he's currently head of a new startup, Casat Corporation. In his talk, Bill intends to argue that the convergence of several technological trends, particularly web services and grid computing, will enable new types of enterprise software that are radically more responsive to business requirements. So, to stay up to date on this talk, other upcoming DSS talks, Distinguished Speaker Series talks, speaking in acronyms here already, or other SD Forum events. I'd encourage you, if you've not already done so, to subscribe to the SD Forum events mailing list. There are sign-up sheets out on the desk in the lobby, and you can also do so on our website, www.sdforum.org. The Computer History Museum has been the primary co-host of this series since its inception. And Gordon Bell played a central role in creating the museum and serves on its board of trustees. Just as the museum is dedicated to preserving the public artifacts and memories of the information age, Gordon's MyLifeBits project is exploring how to use computing to perform an analogous task in the personal realm. And therefore, we thought it very appropriate to ask John Toole, the Executive Director and CEO of the museum, to say both a few words about the museum and to introduce tonight's speakers. John?
Thanks, Andy. Can I close this, Andy?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all. I'm John Toole, and it's really a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be part of the Software Development Forum series of speakers, and particularly this evening for a number of reasons which I'll share with you. There's literature on the Computer History Museum out back. Pick it up on your way out, please. We've got some folks back there that can answer questions. I think you know why we're here. Most of you, I've seen your face before. Come visit us. We have a terrific program of lectures ourselves, which you've seen advertised here. March 25th is our next one, the Osborne Odyssey, and April 7th, the IBM 360 series. But it goes on and on from there in terms of what we're really trying to preserve. And we're trying to preserve software and understand how we can exhibit that in the proper way. So that's a major direction and focus that we have embarked upon, as well as making things available and preserving those things over time. I'll talk about more of that at some other time, because I think you know kind of how important. And I think there's a common theme this evening, that if I may, that Sandy kind of hinted on. It's sort of preserving information of people who have really influenced the industry and to really better understand the future. So there's an incredible wealth of stuff that we can learn from the past and project forward in the future, which becomes very exciting to me as charge of a computer history museum and those people that really established it. And what makes this evening very special, not only with Jim being here and the project that he's working on, but Gordon Bell, is Gordon is really one of the co-founders of the museum back in 1979 with his wife Gwen, who is also here in the audience this evening. So those two people had the vision and persistence in 1979 to begin something that persists today, when we just moved into our new building only a year ago at Shoreline and 101. But there's also, I have to, when I get into kind of the introduction part, I'd like to say there's certain characteristics about people that are really important. And of course, Gordon, if I might focus on Gordon for a moment here, has a certain number of characteristics. I've been very fortunate to know Gordon over the years when he was at the National Science Foundation, and I worked at ARPA, and we interacted in the fear of the legendary Gordon Bell. And I thought to myself, what is it that makes Gordon so legendary? And there's a number of things. And obviously, there's the technical excellence and passion over his lifetime that I think that I'll cite in a moment, a few of the things. And then there's the colorful language that he's sometimes noted for. I've heard rumor that it's taken over a year, 2 years sometimes, just edit the transcripts that Gordon actually has forward, and I believe it. There's the vision of future computing, scalable computing in particular, that he's been noted for many, many years, and ironically, much of that has come true. And if you talk to him on the side, he'll say he only takes certain kind of sure bets, and I think he's smart enough to realize the sure from the not so sure. He certainly agrees on the importance of experimental projects to succeed in the future, and I think that will come across not only in this project, but the great progress that he's made just in the few years that Jim and Gordon have worked together on this. And lastly, the commitment to history, its lessons, and finding kind of the truth of what happens, if there is such a thing in computing history, because there's many different views of it, but you really have to drill down to real technical detail to understand what can be abstracted up and what could be viewed as the times of the past. And just to give you a synopsis, because not everyone in the room, I think, may know all about Gordon, and I'm not going to tell you all about him. I mean, he will tell you all about Gordon. He really spent 23 years at Digital Equipment Corporation as Vice President of Research and Development. And he was just noted for everything at the time. And if you talk to people who worked with him, you'll realize you'd never want to engage Gordon in those long email harangues, because Gordon will win. There's no question about it. In fact, an email exchange that he and I had, he actually deserves credit for the first exposure that I had with the Computer History Museum here on the West Coast. It was some odd hour of night. I remember you sent me that job description and you asked me for my comments. And he caught me that oddball time that I had half an hour to think about it, and I pumped back a whole long harangue of why this was wrong, what you should be doing. And I think that was led to the culmination of me actually coming out to the Computer History Museum, which has been a phenomenal experience for me personally. But more fundamentally, another interaction I had with Gordon. He led the development of the VAX and VAX computing environment. He's got an SB and SM degree from MIT and an honorary Doctor of Engineering from WPI. Between 66 and 72, he was professor of computer science and electrical engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. Widely publicized, go to his website, and just goes page after page after page, and very, very well known in the industry. Another thing he took on was in 86 and 87, when he was the first assistant director of the National Science Foundation's Computing Directorate. Now, most of you don't understand what that may mean, but this was when the whole organization within NSF was really rethinking what computing was all about and information technology. And he helped create that, which persists today in a form that is really important to the funding for research across the country. He's authored many books and papers. including startup companies. In '91, Addison Wesley published High Tech Ventures, the guide to entrepreneurial success. So Gordon got the entrepreneurial spirit to come out here in the Valley and do as much as all of you know that he's been doing. He's evangelized scalable systems way back from the earliest days, and the scalable systems and smaller systems from Digital Equipment Corporation, what it's meant for computing history, has repeated itself over and over again in the industry, something that can be very proud of. He's a founding member, board member of the Computer History Museum, obviously, from the earliest days, and he remains a board member today, and very helpful, and I'm really enthusiastic that he's still part of the organization. All of that became very important to many of us, but his personal interaction really may be some of the most important. His honors go on and on and on, from the IEEE, the ACM, to the 1991 National Medal of Technology, to the Computer History Museum Fellows Award. You can see all this on his website, and I encourage you to do so, because he really has been phenomenal. And recently, of course, for 8.5, 9 years now, he's been a senior researcher at Microsoft's Media Presence Research Group. The other characteristic that Gordon really deserves credit for is surrounding himself with really, really good people. It seems to have persisted every interaction that I've sort of known him from the outside. And Jim Gemmell is certainly a credible part of the team that he's developed and built really at Microsoft Research. And Jim is just one of the, I think, 3 team members on this particular project you're going to hear about in a moment, and have really developed this really exciting project. Jim's been with the group for 8.5 years. His research interests include personal media management, telepresence, and reliable multicast. He received his PhD from Simon Fraser University and a Master's of Math from University of Waterloo. And if you look at Jim's publications, by the way, which are extensive on his website, I picked up one notable thing, Jim, that you seem to be the first author on many of the more recent things, which certainly implies that you're probably capturing much of the stuff that's going on for many of the people that are working together on it. And lastly, let me say the New York Times was very gracious, because there's a great article in the circuit section of the New York Times in today's paper. It's called, "I Know It's Here Somewhere." And it's all about file systems and home networks and how things actually go. Jim Gemmell is quoted many, many times in here, but I'll leave it with that and turn it over to both of them with a quote that he says, "We need software to be your personal assistant." And I know he's going to tell you much, much more about that this evening. Jim and Gordon.
Thank you. So we're going to play tag team through this, and Gordon said to me, "Oh, I don't want to go down and give this talk without you, because our demo has become so long that it's really hard to remember all the pieces to give." So he's dragged me down into that. And if I can back up here, if you want to know the executive summary of the talk, it's this. So we're going to tell you what is MyLifeBits, history, motivation, how we got into this problem and working on it, and then very briefly outline the system, and then the bulk of it hopefully will be demo. And as we're doing that, if you want to go ahead and ask questions, and so there's very few slides to this talk here. It's going to be mostly showing you in practice how it works out with a system that I actually use, and Gordon can share his experiences with that too. So what MyLifeBits is, there's two major components to MyLifeBits. Half of it is an experiment, which is to say to take Gordon's life and to put it in digital form as much as we possibly can. And so that started out with capturing everything from his past, and then once we were getting more or less complete in that area, we said, well, now what can we do in the future? How can we capture more of what's going on in his life in the future? And the second part of it is a software system in support of that for capture, for storage and retrieval, and for organizing and annotating that. And our baseline requirement for the system comes from Vannevar Bush, his Memex vision. So Vannevar Bush was an advisor to President Roosevelt, and back in 1945, he wrote an article called As We May Think, in which he proposed a Memex. This is his hardware diagram on the right, which didn't quite pan out for what we're using, which was microfilm and gears and levers and pulleys and all kinds of stuff like that. But he's wearing a camera on his forehead, which is pretty close. You'll see a picture of Gordon wearing something similar later on. And he really had a amazing ideas. Every time we think that, well, we've surpassed what Vannevar Bush thought of, we go back and read his paper and realize, oh no, we missed a couple of things. I mean, he was incredibly far-sighted. And he proposed, so first of all, he said this is something where you store everything, essentially, all your communications and books and articles and so on. He was really thinking primarily of scientists and how will scientists work in the future. And his feature set included that we wanted to hit full text search, so he was thinking Google ahead of that, text and audio annotations, and hyperlinks. Essentially, he's the guy who said, you know, we could link things together, and he said we could associatively move from item to item the way we think, rather than having to go to the library and look things up in the card catalog. So that's our baseline. And now Gordon, IM Data, is going to come and explain how we got into all this mess.
All right. Yeah, I want to give a little bit of the background of how we came, when we both joined Microsoft about 8.5 years ago, we started to work on telepresence, and we, after a few years, after looking at the whole problem of communications and particularly trying to do video conferencing, we discovered that was a hopeless task for a while, because we have this good competitor, this very low-cost, cheap competitor called the telephone, and it was very hard to beat it out. Eventually, this may happen. I think I'd projected that with the IP phone, that may start. If we can just make it bad enough, why we can be good enough in telepresence to work that. But anyway, we worked there, coined the word telepresentations, and I think got the high-order bit of what telepresence is all about, which is essentially recording video lectures, which we now do. All of our lectures at Microsoft are recorded, and then these are available for playback. So we got out of that field. I kind of got into an area which is essentially what did a remote worker need? And the first thing I found was lots of assistance, and particularly we're low overhead operations. We've recently gone from 5 to 6 people in the lab, in Jim Gray's lab, so a massive 20% increase in the staffing, which is to bring us up to flat. But this is over 9 years. One of the things is needing of assistance to deal with things. And so one of the things I got in was, gee, all this paper's flowing in there. I really would like to have a go at fittingly another cut at the paperless office. As we know what paperless offices mean, basically, it's a computer has made paper production more predominant than anything else. But anyway, and then along about this time, certainly my long-term interest in the museum has been a part of this, and then where I'm interested in the cyber part of the museum, where you basically put everything into bits, people, machines, whatever, particularly the stuff called software, which is already in that form, and we want to run it that way. Raj Reddy had a project in '98 to have 1 million bits. 1 million books. So Raj said, gee, can I scan your books? So I said, sure, scan them. He said, well, what about copyright? And I said, don't worry about that. I've got to work for a company. They've got a lot of lawyers. So if we get in trouble, why? They can bail us out. The publishers still haven't complained about all this. Only one of those books is in print. The High Tech Ventures is on the website, by the way. Has been there for 5 years. Anyway, I got Vicki Roziski joined me in 4 years ago, and we started scanning. And I thought, there are only a few boxes to scan. It turns out that every 6 months we find 2 more boxes that are buried somewhere. We keep scanning all of this stuff. All my part of my deck boxes have started reappearing, and those are we've scanned those. Wrote a paper on the CyberAll, the business of cyberization. We used to call it the CyberAll Project, and just about to go out with a paper in the ACM, and got this little email that said, hey buddy, get off that name. I got the name CyberAll in a trademark, and so we got off of the name, of course. It didn't even go to the Microsoft lawyers there. And it turned out that if you look at Febraury, mostly it comes up with us versus his website. But anyway, Jim made a brilliant contribution about that time when we said, it's really MyLifeBits, and we found, and then I promptly got the website and everything so that we are protected in trademarks and website and names and all of that stuff. But so in January, there was a paper published in the ACM, January 2001, on cyberization and all the aspects of capturing stuff. And then we published a paper last June, a couple of years ago, on home networking. And then about a year ago, we started recording telephone conversations. So we're now moving into we mean everything. So it's scanning and we're moving everywhere. So essentially, I'm the guinea pig here. Started out as the guinea pig, although now I'm probably the smallest guinea pig because Roger and Jim are have put their lives into their systems and are now moving ahead. So my role in the thing is the user or the program, system tester, I think is the name for it. But essentially, books, personal documents. This is everything. We mean scanning everything. Bills, wills, whatever, photos, CD collection, posters, paintings. If you go to my website, you'll get a view of a smattering of all of the kinds of things that I recorded there. Home movies from 8mm to VHS to, and I'm not sure those are on there. Those are so terrible that I don't think anyone would ever want to look at them. That's a job for a computer to sort those out, of course. And of course, all the files in the PC. And then now we're moving into recording, to more recording, and then certainly bringing this into the home where the PC is essentially the mainframe for distributing everything else. One of the things that got us here was looking at this question of, well, do you have enough storage, or where's storage going? And we really feel safe in this, which is, I said, okay, pick a number a few years out and say, what does that get you? And so we chose a terabyte there, which amounts to, if you had a terabyte, then that would be a lifetime usage of 25 megabytes a day. Now, right now I think that's actually conservative with the way I've been using storage recently, but there's probably a storage leak going on somewhere, so we'd probably better find that first. But in fact, I'm sorry, that's 40 megabytes a day over a 25,000 day lifetime, which is about 70 years. So that gets you 100 email messages, a bit of web browsing, and we record every web page you visit. You might scan 5 pages a day. You might buy a book every 10 days. I don't know who takes 400 photos a day. And then also recording of a kind of a low quality, but recording of voice. And then you maybe buy a CD every 10 days. And so that says that over this period, the drives that are becoming available, we've got enough storage to store everything. Of course, if you stay away, with the caveat that you've got to stay away from your recording. There's no point in recording every TV program you watch, because you can record the pointers to those and get those someplace else, because those you rack up maybe 10 or 20 gigabytes a day if you're much of a couch potato. Anyway, these are filling it. If you had a terabyte in a year, why this gives you another view at that, and that is that you could hold 7,000 photos, a lot of documents, and then 4 hours of video per day. So we feel confident that we're on the right track there. So this is in keeping with the Bush's view that essentially that you can, if you inserted 5,000 pages a day, it will take you years to do all this. Being an engineer by training and by I'd say by desire, we want, the issue is how do you make this practical? What do you do with all of that? So we're taking it something, being in research, and we generally don't have to justify this, but I think our goal is how do we make this valuable to our company in order to provide a view of the future products. And so you've got shoeboxes full of, you've got data or bits everywhere, shoeboxes full of data, you've got photo albums, you've got videos, you've got bookshelves and filing cabinets, various professional photos taken, and all of these things are essentially treasured items because they become part of your memory. Probably the only thing among those is the books, which most books you can replace somehow, sometimes at great expense. But in fact, these are the things that people like to take out if they take out with them if there's a fire or whatever. And so these are so we immediately say, what do you do? Of course you back it up because this is your life. This is a part of your memory because in general we advocate not having to have these things around just for the cleanliness and the gains you get. So essentially, you can look at it as, are we eliminating storage? In one sense, when I look at the issue of deleting files, sometimes say, it's costing me more time to delete a file than to just leave it. The only time it's annoying is if I wanted to delete it and then I have to run over that file and it's not the file I wanted. And the other case is, in fact, you want to delete it because you really want to get rid of it, and that we call, like the 14 minutes of the Nixon tape. There are things that you may want to delete, and we mean delete and never reappear. But you've got lots of items here that it's hard to know exactly what you want. So basically, we're recording everything, and those things, it turns out, one of the values of that, and Jim's got demos of, is being able to pivot on things. And then there's a nostalgic and posterity thing. I recently I was at my daughter's house, and I dumped a gigabyte of photos of when she was a child, and all the photos I have of her children and my father's father, her great grandfather and great grandmother, and so there's some value there. But I think pragmatically, we look at this both as a system that you have in the office and one you have at home, and so that's one of the big divisions that we make. And are you doing it for primarily home use, or are you doing the office? And so we believe we need to justify it on an office basis more than in home because it's something we're using all the day. So we're on these machines all the time. And then of course can put the now that we've got it, the big problem is, okay, what do you do with it? And that gets into the whole application. So the first thing I found when I had enough stuff on there was, oh my God, I can't find anything. I tried indexing services. I went through a number of third-party products. I harassed our people to buy a few companies. And all of that failed, so we convinced Jim to start building for us. So anyway, Jim's going to give the demo and talk about the system.
Okay. And so once again, Vannevar Bush had thought of this already. I like in particular the latter quote here. He says, talking about scientific published, it's not publications. It's not that we publish too much. It's our ability to make use of it that's the problem. And the same thing here we'd say about MyLifeBits. It's not that we keep too much. It's our ability to make use of what we keep. And so Gordon, I was happily working on reliable multicast protocols, and Gordon came along and said, oh, no, I've scanned all this stuff, and I've created a big mess. So I got involved, and also Gordon's mentioned Vicky, who's done a lot of the scanning for us, most of that work, and the other person missing today is Roger Luter, who's done most of the software development for us. So Roger and I got involved working on this and started building. So we started out, we looked at it, we said, okay, we're going to base this on SQL Server. We looked at it and said, well, if we don't use a database, we'll end up building one once we looked at our feature list. So we had a database at the heart of it, and the first thing we said was, okay, we can import files into it. So we were actually sucking files into the database, and everything lived in the database. And then we wanted to be like Vannevar Bush, so we wrote a text annotation tool so that we could annotate things. And then we said, well, we've got to look at what we've got, so we have a shell. And then we added voice annotation. We wanted to be able to get email in and out, so we wrote a MAPI client, so Outlook's happy to talk to it. And we wanted to capture web pages. Then we got on a little tangent where we said, what about radio? So we actually still record radio, and we wanted to listen to it in our car, and we had a little pocket PC device. It's sort of like TiVo for your radio, and quickly discovered that a graphical user interface is very dangerous in your car. So we redid it to be an audio interface that would talk to you and tell you what buttons you're hitting and what show you're on and so on. And likewise, we're interested in telephone capture and TV capture. We've recorded about 2 terabytes of TV just to see what it feels like. Like, we were interested in the scale of this, beyond what you might fit now. What's it like when you have actually 800 shows that you probably like all of them? What do you do with that, and what happens to the whole interface with that? And then the bad news. So you see here, at this point, there's just database in the slide. Let's see if I can get this working. So we had just the database at the heart of it, and then we discovered, well, there's legacy applications that really like things in our folders and directories and all that sort of thing. And also, we were having to copy out to temporary files to deal with stuff, and when that hit big videos, it wasn't working out. So we finally gave in and said, all right, files can be a part of this, but very reluctantly. And life was great before files came along. I had one database, I backed it up, things wouldn't get inconsistent if I did a rename of something. And now we live on the ragged edge with the files in our universe once again. And last but not least, we slipped in instant messenger capture. Actually, I need to update this slide because Roger's been so busy. I'm going to demo some more things that are on this page, but you'll get the feel for that anyhow. But that's just to give you the big picture before we dive in the demo so you know what we're dealing with. So we said, all right, we need to make the store useful. There's a number of features here that we wanted to focus on. Annotations, alternatives to hierarchy for organization, database features. I'll get into that in the demo, so I won't spend a long time on it now. As I say, we looked at it and we said, we really want everything in the database because here's the list of these features that I mentioned. When we looked at it and said all the things we need, we'd either end up building or buying one, so we'd rather buy one. And we have both the file system and the database. Okay, so just enough background to get you into the demo here. We have entities and links. So if you have a photo and an event on your calendar, we can have a link between those saying this is a photo of an event. And the links have different types. So that link is a photo of event type. A caller in your contact list can be the caller in a phone call, in a recorded phone call. Or some text can annotate a picture. Or there's another concept, I won't get into it later, but it's essentially inclusion, that one thing can be included or transcluded inside another. And there can be many more relationships than that. But so if you understand that we have these entities and they can be related to one another, that should be enough to get us going. This is just showing how we've implemented that in our schema. And so this is a bunch of different entity types that we have, and everything is a resource to us, as we call it, and they can be in relationships. And we have an event log where we're trying to track as much as possible what do you do with all this. And the final area down here is just indicating what sort of entities you're dealing with. Okay, so let's get down to the fun part here and show you what it's like. Actually, let me. Okay, So we said we're trying to do everything. Let me just illustrate here with a search for Gordon and what that gets. So that hits 9,000 items. You'll see here I have a bunch of different things coming back. When I search for Gordon, I got emails and Word documents and all kinds of stuff. If I look here, I can say what columns in this detailed. So here's all the different types of things that came back from that hit, and they all have different attributes. So music can show different things than images can, and so on. If I look, here's a breakdown of the different things that I have, and this is my personal collection. I actually use this day to day. So I have a whole bunch of web pages. We have the information on all the on TV shows that we've recorded here, phone calls, instant messenger logs. We're shooting for everything. That's the point you need to take from that. Okay, so we started this out. We said, how do we make the store useful? And one of Gordon's first observations was that he had all these wonderful old photos. And you'd look at it after a while and say, what is that? So here's a photo. And you look at it and say, well, yeah, I remember those people. I think I know what that was about. And he got so frustrated, he came to me and says, Jim, it's just bits until it's annotated. I mean, it's almost worthless to me. So he said, all right, we need to do something about it. How can we make that situation better? So he started to say, well, let's see. In detail view, I could tell you when it was created, or when if I slide it further here, we have when the photo was taken. And these days we have GPS and various things. We have a bunch of attributes. That makes the world better. That's good. It's okay. Not that great, though. Maybe we could go and ask it, how have you been using this item? And you could say, well, I've opened a bunch of times at different times, and maybe you might have emailed it, and we've tracked that. And we could say, well, you seem to like it. You're using the thing. That's useful. But still, it's not that great. Where we really start getting more interesting is when here's an annotation of the item saying, bark, dim sum, intern, farewell lunch. So that's only 6 little words. But by having those 6 little words, the value of this item has gone up tremendously for us. It's like, oh, yeah, I remember now. Those are our interns. We were saying goodbye to them. You get the time and so on, and you start placing what it is. I have 6 search terms. That's great, too. Now I have something to hunt for. But the annotation itself is just intrinsically valuable. So now I don't want to play down search terms because we said, can you find anything? That's big. But I assume with everyone here, that's a given. We know we need to search for stuff. But I also want to just emphasize the annotations are so valuable in their own right. So, for example, I do have a little bit of Gordon's collection with me here. And so here's a bunch of old family photos that he's got. And now I want you to imagine that you're Gordon's great-grandchild and you're looking at these photos. Well, what are they? Well, here's the Bell family sawmill. That's pretty good. It turns out here we have an audio annotation. So we're going to play some audio here now.
Family sawmill, and that's how they made their living. And they had to, I think, walk quite a distance to this sawmill. But this is all the kids, but probably the babies. So that's Gordon's sister speaking. She visited our lab, and she doesn't want to put a lot of work or investment into the system or anything like that, but she was very happy to reminisce and talk and tell us what she knew about these pictures. And again, I just say to you, if you're a great-grandchild in the Bell family, and you can hear great-great-aunt Sharon sharing with you, oh, yes, that's how the family made our living, and we had to walk a long way to it. That annotation, now, don't get me wrong. If we convert it to text, you can search on it. Fantastic. But even if you never do, that audio annotation is a priceless family heirloom. So we want to encourage annotations as much as we can. And, if you talk to people and they'll say, well, people don't want to do annotations. That's work. They don't want to bother. And there's a large element of truth to that. We're not naive. I say, well, let's set our goals right. Maybe you would annotate 1% of your collection. And I'm going to write really great tools and double it to 2%. Okay? So we're not, ridiculously thinking that you're going to do a lot of work and annotate everything. But we think we can significantly increase what you annotate. And for example, I enjoy the trivial features of the Microsoft products. Like Windows XP came out, and one of the biggest things for me was that it had this little photo wizard. So, because it used to be my digital photos, I'd suck them in the computer, and they're all called things like DFC0494.
right? And then I'd never be bothered afterwards to go rename those things, or 99% of them. But now this wizard pops up right when I'm doing it. It says, what do you want to call these things? What do you want to call all of them? I go, oh, well, I can type in something now. So now most of my photos have names. They might not be the best, but they have names. And the point is, there was a sweet spot there of when I would be willing to say something about it, and it let me do a gang annotation to say something about all of them at once. And we said, well, okay, how do we do this in general? Where do we find sweet spots and places to annotate? So let's say you are running the browser, you're out on the web, and we have right here's the MyLifeBits tool, web archiving enabled. So we record every page you visit. That's not the URL. That's an actual copy of the page. And so while I'm out on the web looking at stuff, if I want to say something about it, I ought to be able to do that right now while I feel like it. So I'll say, oh, look, I want to make an annotation. No, go away. I'm trying to do pop-ups on me. I want to make an annotation and say something about this web page. Okay. Maybe typing text is too hard for you. You ought to just be able to click a button and talk. And it should record what you're saying. Now, you're not going to want to edit that afterwards. And often you wait and you go, has it really started? You wait a few seconds. It's terrible listening. At first we created these annotations, and you'd have to wait 3 seconds until you heard anything. So we wrote some code that automatically strips out silence. It turned out it had the side benefit that if you're surfing the web, whenever you talk, it's an annotation. Whenever you don't, it's not. So you could just surf the web and talk. So I have an example of that one. There's a web page that I visited before. And
this is the home page of Marcia Bates. I had a meeting with her at UCLA. We had an interesting...
Okay. Anyhow, it's a little bit hard to hear, but it doesn't matter. The point is, again, I was just surfing the web, and I want to talk about a web page that is on. So that makes it easy. Okay, while we were surfing the web, though, we found out that we were creating a lot of annotations that said, good. And that didn't seem like the right way to do things. So we realized what we really wanted here was a rating system. So you'll see there's a little thumbs up button here on the side where I can click it and say, yeah, that's a good web page. And then there's queries we have back in the shell to say, oh, I only want to look at the good stuff. And then the other thing we found out, I was also entering a whole bunch that said, read this later. And so we created a reading stack. It's sort of like your inbox of web pages where you say, yeah, this is something I got, and you got the copy of it, right? So if you're on the airplane the next day and you say, oh yeah, what were those web pages I didn't get around to reading, you can bring them up and read the stuff in your reading stack. And of course, all this has to be back, if I'm in the shell, I should be able to select everything all at once and say, all right, I want to annotate all of these, an audio annotation, a text annotation, thumbs up, thumbs down. We even found right-clicking and having to do that stage can be too much of a barrier. So there's a quick one-liner, we call it up here, where you can just click and type, and you're ready to roll with annotating. So at any time, you can annotate a whole bunch of stuff. So if you ever feel like it, we want to be there to let you do it. OK, so that's the first bit, is we want to enable annotations to make things more useful. The second piece was organization. Now, you got so much, can we organize this in a useful way? And our first observation was, when we have these directories that we use, and you have C:my stuff /this/that, it's a mangling of a bunch of concepts, really. You think about it, it's the display string that you're going to see for that file. It's the storage location for the file, where it's going to be stored. It's your hierarchical organization for it. And it's also its unique identifier. And so we said, well, in our system, those concepts should be completely distinct. You should just be able to call it whatever you want. It doesn't need to be unique. We don't care where it's stored. Stuff it somewhere in the database. Don't bother me. I might not even want to give the thing a name, but if I do, here's the display string and so on. And the system can look after the identification. So we adopted that approach, and then we said, you know what? Not only that, but when I had to put a thing in one directory, it's very limiting. I mean, sometimes it's, the file has applicability in more than one place. So let's let it be filed in more than one place. So we built that, and we have, this is a collections, we call them. And I can go and say, all right, I want to put something in, add it to a collection, and I can go in and pick a whole bunch of places and say, yeah, stick it in all of them. And I thought, this is going to be fantastic. I'm going to take my stuff, and I'm going to organize it. My collection structure is going to be huge. I'm going to really work on it. Turned out to be completely wrong. The folder structure that I brought over from Windows has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and I'll show you why. It turns out that a lot of the things that I use folders for are just much better done in other ways. So, for example, I had a lot of folders that looked like this. May 2003 pictures. I had all kinds like that. Well, guess what? It's a database. I can write a query. It says, find me all pictures taken in May 2003. Has the added benefit that if I get a new picture, you email me a picture taken in May 2003. I don't have to file it and probably misfile it the way I do things. It's automatically there. Okay, so now all those folders go away. Well, what other kind of folders did I have? I had here's an actual one. This is it looks a little different because it's an actual folder from my file system. It's called Jesse Wedding Reception and Other. That's from that wizard, right? So what do you want to call these things? I said, yeah, there it is. It's these things. So it's got wedding reception. It's got a couple of shots of the dog and random things like that. Well, what was I intending with Jesse's wedding reception? Well, that was an event I attended, and it turns out Jesse's wedding reception is on my calendar. So if I click Jesse's wedding reception, the pane up here is our related items pane. Oh, I've lost Jesse now. Let's go back here. Jesse's reception. And now, when I hover, I get a little thing saying, what kind of link do these have to that? Remember, we had entities and links? So this photo entity has a link to this event in my calendar saying it's a photo of that event. And now I get the actual photos just of that event. And a lot of this we can automate. If the pictures are coming from me, our wizard says to you, do you want to create links with things? If the photo's taken at the same time as something in your calendar, do you want to create those links? We say, yeah, because most of the time it's me taking the pictures and I can infer those links. So goodbye to a whole bunch more folders that I used to have. Well, how about I also had a whole lot of folders, photos of Sam, photos of whoever. Well, that's much nicer done if I go and look at people. Here's my daughter. If I click on her, I'll see there's a bunch of links, person in photo. So it's better managed that way, and I can get all the photos of her. What it boils down to is, in the end, my collection structure is shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. I'll talk a little bit more about classifications later, but my feeling at present, and we're still kind of playing with all this, is that for the most part, these collections will be sort of ad hoc stuff. There'll just be a few of them. They'll be short-lived. I doubt very much whether I'll understand what I meant a few years from now if I go back and look at those. And they're really just sort of workspace more than anything. But even workspace, I said, well, there's one folder I'm going to keep forever. It's my working set folder, where I keep all the stuff I'm working on, I'm using day in, day out. I'll never get rid of that. But then I thought a little bit, well, wait a minute. What if I issued a query, and it says something like this? It's a lot of yucky math, but the basics behind it is, if you've been working on something for 3 years on and off, and now you haven't used it for 3 weeks, chances are you're going to use it again. If I've been using it for 1 day, and now I haven't used it for 3 weeks, chances are probably no. So I wrote that query and issued it, and we said, okay, what does that look like? My working set. And it went out, and it nabbed everything that was in my working set folder except for one. I said, oh, what's the problem here? I looked at it. It was right. It was something I wasn't using anymore. So even my favorite folder that I thought I'd never give up can be redone by a query. And we have a bunch of other, recently open we have, but the noise that gets into that is stuff you'll never use again. And Roger has some other fun, annotated web items, or a whimsical one that Roger liked to do is this day in history. What did I do in the same day in history? And he wrote, he came back and said, what's weird? He says, I always move at the same time of year. When I ran that query, I hit these emails, and I'm always kind of moving. I don't know what it is about June. So there's a bunch of neat queries you can have. All right, so organization moved a lot away from collections and towards more links and relationships. The other thing is we got a database here, and you wonder, well, what's in my database? Well, you can do a report. So what kind of files do we have in here? Here's file counts, or how am I using space in the file system here? Well, here's how the space is being used in there. Or what TV channels are we actually recording things off of and that we're really glad DirecTV made us have, and which ones are just a ripoff and which we didn't have. Or even more elaborate, where we could say, of all my email, when am I sending email about MyLifeBits? And with Gordon, I like to run this one with swear words, and we see how his frustration level over time. It's pretty accurate, I think, right? All right. So full text search is a given. We won't go into that, but the ways that we search the collection and look for things, a little different than, again, we had necessarily anticipated. So for instance, let's go back again to that search for Gordon. Let's say I was searching for a photo of Gordon. We have an advanced search where we can go in and specify up front, yeah, I want photos and the date range and all this kind of stuff. Rarely use it. We like to be lazy because you worry that, well, maybe I'm too tight, I'm going to miss it. So you try to be really broad to start, and then if you're forced to, you narrow down. So I just say Gordon, and I go, oh, 9,000 hits. Okay, that's not good. So how can I narrow it down? And we have this refinement pane where we can say, well, really, I'm only interested in the images. And at that point, I can just browse my way through images that I have that match Gordon. Another example of this is sometimes even you don't remember exactly, what you're looking for. So you say, oh, who was that guy? I don't remember his name, who said that really cool thing, but I don't remember anything about it or any words that he used. But it was a thread that was kind of about storage. Do you ever do something like that? So you say storage, and again, hit everything. 2,600 items. We say, well, let's only look at the email messages. And we still got 963. But if I look at who they're from, we do a quick clustering on who they're most commonly from. Most of them are from me and Gordon. As we go down the list here, oh, yeah, Kilroy. That's who I was after, and let's only look at his, and he made that insightful comment. So we can narrow in on things. Another way to do it is on the fly, with the database, we can retrieve all the dates and say, well, when did we get this? When were these messages sent? And this is clustered on the fly. It's going using a combination of gaps in time and a k-means algorithm to say, let's just find some clusters of dates for you. And maybe that'll help jog your memory of, oh, yeah, there was that exchange of email there. Or another way is, let's see, my dentist is Dr. Nadler. So I can search for Nadler here. And let's say I'm looking for some bills from him. I could go down to the images. We also here have been playing with classification. So some of these have been classified as statements. They're from the insurance company and their statement. But other ones we've classified as bills. And so we could actually go in and say, oh, yeah, I can pull up that bill from my dentist again and get at it. So it's another way of refining it and what you want. But there's other ways still where full-text search just won't do it for you because you don't remember any terms. So I've copied a little bit of Gordon's life into mine for this. So let's suppose you're Gordon and you decide you want to sell your home. And your real estate agent phones you up and she says, well, let's talk about your home. And in the middle of the conversation, she says, oh, hey, bring up this web page. Here's a really interesting comparable property. Have a look at that. Now, a few months pass, and Gordon says, oh, yeah, what was that property? I want to look at that one again. Well, what's he going to type, home or real estate? I mean, he was looking at thousands of web pages like that at that time. He's just going to get swamped. So he says, well, what do I remember? He remembers that scenario. Who did I talk to? So you go back and say, all right, here's my real estate agent, Connie, and I have a link saying that she's the caller in this call. So I could go back and listen again to the call.
You can create the market for the property by pricing it well. Everyone I've talked to.
Okay, so you could listen to it. That'd be a little bit tedious. But he remembered, okay, it was during this conversation that I looked at that web page. So we could say, let's pivot. We call it pivot to everything that overlapped that in time. So what happened? What do I have in my LifeBits during the time that that phone call occurred? And the database is quite happy to use this index to look that up and say, oh, yeah, I've got a copy of this web page. It's no longer on the web anymore because the home sold ages ago. But we've got it. It's not up here. So we've got a copy of it here with all the information that he wanted to get on it. Okay, so how do we get to that page? We followed a link, and then we did this pivot, as we call it, using the index of the database. So we're using links and database features to get at it, where we couldn't remember any search terms that would really help us get to it. Here's something we just started playing with, which is also using maps. So let's back out here. So load from California. So I spent the last weekend with the GPS in my car and taking photos. And here we're saying the dots here on the screen show where photos were taken. And so last weekend I was down in Los Angeles, so I can go in here and narrow in on Los Angeles and look at, oh, here's the spots where I have photos. And we went to the beach one time, and I had my boys down for a hockey tournament. it was really neat for me to go back and see the distinction here between if I click on this here, you see this turns yellow, that's our hotel. Or if I go, no, that's also the hotel. Where's the, here we go. The distinction between the rink over here or us being at Starbucks around the corner. And it's really cool, the resolution, whereas what my memory might have been going back to say, it was somewhere in LA, to here it's like, oh, it's on that street corner. It's a really neat way to go back into things. How else do we want to get at stuff? Something else we started playing with is saying, what about just similarity? So again, we don't want to have to do a lot of work of filing. What if we just went to an item and said, here's my MCI bill, and I said, what are similar things to that MCI bill? And this is just a simple first paper we could find on text similarity, so nothing advanced at all, but we just want to see, is it any use at all? Just comparing term frequency. And it comes up and says that other MCI bills are similar to it, so that's good. It's true. But I was interested to see as I go down, here's my SBC bill. So it somehow had enough there to figure out the SBC and MCI have similarities. So that's kind of neat. Or another interesting example, if we look back at everything in the TV shows that we've recorded, and let's go by genre down to the suspense ones. If I look in arachnophobia and ask it what are similar items, it figured out the Spider-Man is similar. I thought that was fun. And an email about a killer app. So we're hoping that eventually this will help us not only with just finding similar things, but also where we do want to do organization and put things in collections, the system ought to be able to say to us, do you really want to put that in that collection? Because everything else in it has no similarity to it whatsoever. And if you're like me, I don't know how many times I drag over and I intend to hit a folder and hit the one just below it. And you discover that, of course, when it's urgent 3 weeks later, right? And you can't find the thing that you're after. So hoping similarity will help us out there. All right, then, so we went a lot of, you have a question? You know what? That's on our to-do list, and we're bad boys for not having implemented it yet. But yeah, we definitely want to save all the searches. Right now, we're logging all the things that you open and close, but the searches, in fact, I was just saying today, because Gordon is such a fascinating user, a lot of this is such new territory. How do you do this? And it's very interesting. How does someone use it once you've got it? Actually, I went down to UCLA, and I was talking with the people in the information science school there. And I said, oh, you can tell me all about these classifications and so on. And tell me the answer. What should I do? And they just went, wow, that's really interesting. Nobody's ever done this as a personal collection before. We don't know. That's an interesting research area. So that's really important. We don't know how people would want to use it. We want to capture that. Our goal is capture everything. So we're just ticking off the list. Yeah, we'll capture that. We'll capture that. Mm-hmm. Junk mail, yeah.
That's a lot of my time spent with that. Does that go on and appear in here too? Does it get to go on and clutter up my hierarchy along with like it does my life and my day as well? Or
let's. Yeah, that's a great question. And Gordon and I have a wonderful debate on this, don't we? But let's start with the mail. The mail actually, presuming that you deal with your junk mail initially, if you can mark it as junk, it can be marked as junk, and we have the Don't Show Me Junk filter. And an analogous problem that Gordon's running into is it's the New York Times, right? So you hit the New York Times, he walks through the same hierarchy every day. And then when you get to a good article, it shows you page 1, page 2, and then you decide, no, really, I want the print version, right? And you get all these copies of the same thing. So Gordon was so frustrated, he was ready to turn off the MyLifeBits recorder. He says, there's too much clutter. But what I've been saying is, again, it's very hard to predict what you would want and what you wouldn't. So if you visited these web pages, keep them. The storage is not a problem. You can mark the good ones. Thumbs up, we have that in there. You can mark the good ones and you can sift through them. So again, as long as there's a way of sifting through them. Now in the case of junk mail, it's kind of like you want to screen it up front and have it never come into your collection because it just wastes time. But it's true even within your collection. Like for example, photos, that's why rating's important on the photos. Most of the time I don't want to see my bad photos. But very rarely, when I'm very interested in a specific event and what happened, that'll override my sort of rating of, well, this was a little blurry or whatever, and just because of the pure content, I'll want to look at it for nostalgic reasons or whatever. So again, the idea is that if you can flag it somehow, we can hide it from you. That's not a problem. Yeah?
You showed a whole series of different file types. Presuming this becomes a historic archive, how are you dealing with the issue that a .doc in 2004 is not opened the same way as a .doc from 1980?
That is a fantastic question, but you know, let me defer that, okay, because I want to get Gordon up on this, and I have a slide at the end. So make me keep my promise. Don't let me forget, but we'll get back to that one. Actually, tell you what, in fact, I have just a couple more things to demo, and then we'll make some conclusions, and then maybe we can take a bunch of questions all at once. But maybe I'll demo a couple of things that you're wondering about here as I wrap up. So part of the organization, I talked about faceted classification, so we've just begun with this. I'm a real rookie. I don't quite know what I'm doing, but what I have learned is that where I didn't want to necessarily create a whole bunch of collections, if I want to classify things, here we go. Let's say instead of having these folder structures with these fixed names and so on, I might think of different words at different times. So if I write an essay, I would often call that a paper. And I'd say, oh, I want to file a paper here. And it should search the system and say, oh, I've matched with essay here, which has a synonym paper. And here's the definition, by the way, an interpretive or analytic composition. So that as people want to enter things, they don't have to always remember the exact word. And they have something with a definition and other synonyms to help guide them. Am I filing it in the right place? And the idea here is, for a lot of common sort of classifications like this, like what type of document it is, users don't want to create this stuff. They don't want to create their class. They want to go to classifications.com and say, I'm a middle-aged guy living in Silicon Valley area, and and I got some kids. Give me all the classifications I need, or as you're interested. And some people really care about classifications of ships and that they have hull links and all this other kind of stuff. And to the rest of us, it's just a boat, right? So you get the level that you really want it at. So we've been playing a lot with these classifications, and they're pretty thorny to define, but we think that at least those elements of knowing synonyms and having definitions available that are very important, and that we need ways of sharing this information. The other thing I wanted to show you before we get away here is, to talk about video. So we said, okay, moving forward, Gordon had very little video, I don't know why he just wasn't into it. And we said, okay, now we can really capture it. So we went out and shot all this digital video, and I said, this is a black hole. We have all these tapes, and they sit there, and we never look at them again. In fact, when Gordon was talking about why bother, when we first started this, our boss, Jim Gray, said to us, are you guys inventing the write once, read never memory? We had, but with video, it was really true. That we're never going to look at it again. So we said, well, we're MyLifeBits. We can handle this. We'll digitize it all. So we created a digital black hole. Because again, it was these huge video files sitting on our hard drives, and we were never going to go, there's some little clip you're interested in, you forget it. So we went into our Movie Maker product and stole some code from it that does segmentation. We said, okay, let's see, I have a trip here. This is a DV that I shot in Montreal, and it's broken down into all the clips of the video. And so that's nice. So now I could go get individual pieces, and it's a bit better, but still, the hassle of hunting through video is high enough that I often don't want to bother. And so we said, well, what is the killer app in this space? We think it's probably the screensaver. So the screensaver that we have here is going to alternate between video. Let's see, I'm going to turn my audio down here because you don't want to hear this. These are going to be a bunch of my kids play hockey, and so we have these hockey clips. So you alternate between video and an image and back to another video. Okay, now we said, what's the sweet spot? We're all sitting around. You want to say something about it? Click, enter an annotation. My observation was in my family, with our photo screensaver running, it's not lack of annotation. We talk about them all the time. It's that there's nothing there to capture those comments. So if you feel like typing, we ought to let you type. We haven't built it yet, but the same thing, if you feel like talking, you ought to be able to talk. Or if you just want to indicate, yeah, that is a great video. We're getting these little thumbs up down here at the bottom as I press a key. And we want to put that on a remote control in my home so that if you have that, you go, oh yeah, that's cool. And that should be part of it, or you can say, I hate it. Thumbs down. So that should be part of the feedback loop to the screensaver then to say, well, you really hated that one. I'm only going to show it to you once every 20 years. But you love these other ones. And plus, we know about how you're using things and so on. I think we can write a really interesting sort of screensaver disc jockey for you who will serve things up. And again, we want to capture your comments as you do things. Hopefully someday we'll have a camera mounted and you'll just gesture, or when you talk, we'll get the voice interface and get the video out of the black hole. Okay, one last thing in the demo. I want to show you a query that's going to take a little while here because this is a search for all my web pages that I've captured. And last summer, I had a little problem. Let's go to a time view of this. So this is going to show everything. So this is let me make it a little bigger for you so you can see it. So these are all the web pages by time broken down. You can flip through them. Down below is the distribution of them in time. And this gap that you see is where I was a bad boy and did not back up. And right here, my hard drive failed. And I just want to close the demo with this, sharing this experience with you. When my hard drive failed and I lost 3 or 4 months worth of web pages, before that day I thought, this is kind of a neat feature. Like, it's kind of cool and I can tell people about it. But when I lost it, I realized this is an indispensable feature. I count on it now. I know that if I visited that spec on our internal website, I've got it when I'm in flight. Right? I was counting on if I was just hitting web pages purely for the purpose of having them in my collection with no intention to read them unless maybe I needed to sometime in the future. And it felt like somebody had ripped memories away from me. And I realized, oh, this isn't just a cool feature. This is something I really count on now. And it took a hard drive loss to bring that home. But. All right, so let's sum up. So we're in this era of virtually unlimited storage, like Vannevar Bush said we should get to, so we can do the Memex. So the interesting thing is, yeah, none of the ideas are new. People have been talking about them for 50 years, but finally we're at the point where it's cheap enough, it's convenient enough, the technology is there. I can run SQL Server on my notebook with an 80 gig drive and do this stuff, and it's no problem. So we can do this. And I hope I've made a case that to make the store useful, we at least need really good annotations at the sweet spots, typed links, and to use database features. Going forward, Bush talked about what's creative thought and what's not, and needing help from the system. In a lot of ways, we had to say, so far as MyLifeBits, just enough rope to hang yourself with. So links are cool, and classifications are cool, and all this stuff, I hope I've made a case that it's useful. You can also do really stupid things with them and just make a complete mess of your collection. So the quote we had before was, MyLifeBits has to become my personal assistant. What can we do going forward where the machine helps you do the organization and you don't have to do a lot of it yourself? Also, of course, content analysis and data mining will help that out. If we have face recognition, then you don't have to label what things are, or this document similarity type ideas. Clean living is one. So I talked about this replication of web pages. We call it clean living we need to deal with. You have so many duplicates in your system, the same web page that you hit over and over again. Or here's the bump or the GIF of the same file. Or here's version 1, 2, 3 of the Word doc. And you want that somehow rolled up so you deal with it and detect duplicates and versions and so on. And try and do some metadata extraction, like my phone bills would be nice if the system could look at them and figure out what's the date of the bill and the amount and kind of the high-level bits. We haven't done a lot of work on UI yet. We want to do more with that. We've got some students at San Francisco State doing some user studies and trying to understand how people react to some of these things. We want to get in more and more visualizations. So, I showed you like a timeline view, but in a way, we'll all become scientists. We all have these big data sets to do visualizations on, just like the physicists have now. And we want to explore ways to do that and give people lots of different angles, different ways of looking at their collection, like Andy Van Dam says in this quote here, where it's, don't tell me that this is the only way I can look at things. I need to do it in a lot of ways. And finally, so here's Gordon looking a little bit like Vannevar Bush's diagram. He's stereo. which turns out Vannevar Bush thought of that too. Too bad. But stereo cameras or on-arm measuring what again? Temperature.
Yeah, heat flux and acceleration and basically gives you a good accounting of the amount of energy you spend. Also tells you when you're sleeping and waking and all that kind of stuff. It's by a company called Body Media in Pittsburgh.
And down at the bottom here, this is by Quindy doing meeting capture. So there's a bunch of new forms of capture, and especially sensors, GPS units, and all these different things where, so it's not just, we start out kind of documents and media, and now we realize we need to also branch out into sensor data also and deal with what you do, with your lifetime record of that. And MyLifeBits.com has more, but I promise to get back to Dear Appy, how committed are you? Signed, lost, and forgotten data. And maybe, Gordon, you want to address that.
Well, I mean, I think this is one that anybody who's in the archiving business really worries a lot about, particularly archivists who say, 500 or 1,000 years for paper, and so what are you going to do for me now, given, I have a little trouble reading Mac 5.1 on today. At least I can open it, but the...
How about your 8-inch deck floppies? How did
the
those
8-inch
go?
deck floppies were, fortunately I got that just in time, and somebody had offered that as a service. But this is, and it's one that we're, in the museum, we're grappling with right now. And so the answer, for a lot of this, you basically just record the it's hard to say you're going to keep that program alive. That is, you do it on, I can almost guarantee Quicken and Money 98 will not run Quicken 2010 or something like that. And so a lot of these, fortunately, are transaction-based systems, and basically we do make the equivalent of a dump of the transactions, which is just a linear. All of the transactions are put out, and either in a Word or I personally, for that, I like HTML as the favorite media that will go forward in the future, but I'm not sure that everybody agrees with that.
Or it helps to have some belief that you could crack it yourself.
Yeah. and
the specs short
of
enough
course, right now the language of that is probably PDF in terms of putting everything in that. So a lot of our stuff is in PDF, and
but it's also in TIFF.
And TIFF,
because we're paranoid.
TIFF, PDF.
Who knows, right?
Yeah. And having the minimal amount of document, what we call golden document types. God, can't change JPEG. Please don't. Look, we're all dead if the whole digital photography thing goes down the tubes without that path to pull that forward. So you got on Dear Appy, there are really 4 problems. I mean, it starts at the media level, goes up to the platform level, goes to the application. So you've got a huge number of levels here that all have to be dealt with. Yeah.
On the previous slide, by the way, I'm just curious.
Our URL?
No, just go back. That one.
Yeah.
How are you going to get past Steve Mann's problem? Steve Mann got arrested at the airport greeting and the like.
Smaller cameras. Don't get caught.
No, it's not Steve's anymore. So Steve is our new friend.
Yeah, we know Steve. Yeah,
we're trying to do a workshop with him next year. A lot of this is unknown, and there's a range of what people want to do with this, right? So Gordon has his telephone recording, and I don't know whether he's going to wear the Steve Mann type glasses or not. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not recording everything at that kind of level. On the other hand, I still accumulate enough digital crap, just with very intentional photo taking, video taking, etc., that I have all the same problems. So while we can explore whether the on switch is always on is an open question, and it maybe depends on the person as much as anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're certainly not obsessive about that. Although I'd say Roger, in fact, is probably the most obsessive now, because we measure it by who's got the smallest camera around, and so he has one that he always carries with me. With these, it's hard not to have a camera, although hard to distinguish whether you can actually see the picture at 15 kilobytes, what they take. But certainly there's more of that's around. And then we're looking at other devices that would do the capture. I think conversational capture is an interesting area, and the folks at Princeton were getting up to, and the computer science department were getting up to go into the DARPA LifeLog business, and before it got canceled, and they've got a very nice recording device for, 2 or 3 people can be sitting around and capture, and you can capture that. All that gets into, and then that drags you into, we have a bunch of what we call classical problems. Dear Appy is sort of number one of how do you keep it going forward. Then there's problems of deniability. I never said that, or wait a minute, those are half my bits. You can't, like we signed these agreements to videotape this. Whose bits are those? So you have ownership.
Or how about when people call you up and say, "Did you record that last phone call?"
Yeah, right.
Unrecord it.
Get rid of that. now. Okay. Yeah, we can't really shred anything very easily now.
It seems like there are several parts of the spectrum. Like content analysis is extremely important. The human mind is fabulous. So you can take a picture of a group and say, oh, I can select somebody out of that group, and I can find them. But the mind really goes further than that and looks at objects. And one time we were looking for a paper, for instance, an atmospheric physics paper. And so my advisor had a stack of papers. And so we looked, and there was a torn edge, right? A little. That's it. He pulls it out. He says nothing ever gets lost. But the human mind is wonderful at that. And so a lot of it is a fuzzy search and content analysis, which is vague. And someone's looking.
That's why you put these little fuzzy things on there too. In effect, those little things are that.
Maybe we should be randomly tearing the edges of our
You need a subconscious. You need to
block
out.
All the images and papers are there, so that the TIFFs have a thumbnail, and those are important.
I was wondering before you go and start question and answer, did you have any more concluding comments before we wanted to go into the question and answer?
We're in the question.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. In that case, it's time to open up the microphones. And we will try to find an additional microphone. And be sure to pass the microphone back when you're done at your question.
Just talk will be fine.
Yeah. 2 quick questions about, both related to you said you don't expect people to be doing folders, that it's all going to be query-based. One is
that's not quite right. I think that people will use them, but just that they might not have a lot of longevity. And I think the classifications that I showed you are going to look a lot like folders to you, the difference being that someone else is going to build the folder structure for you up front. So it still is there. It's just that a lot of previous uses of folders go away, and a lot of what the user does is sort of ad hoc and short-lived.
Okay. One piece I'm wondering is, how do you convey the idea of these are virtual folders in the interface? And in particular, how do you get people out of the idea of, well, it looks like a folder, and of course, I know folders in the real world, everything is only in one folder at a time. And just how do you get their head around that concept?
By the way, I'd like to make a comment about the folders. The person I know very well, used to be my helper at Digital, is teaching computing to a whole range of people, that everything from sort of Word to fancy publishing things. And her comment is she doesn't think people have the foggiest idea what folders are. That in fact, you do a document, and so we support that, which is, hey, I wrote a document, and where did it go? It's just there. And so there's no structure there, and so what you do is you go back and find that by by some handle on it. By the way, time is your best handle in a lot of these things in terms of when did I do something, and so you try to bracket time, and then by having a lot of time, a lot of the time, our friends, there's another project at Microsoft it's based on current stuff I've seen, and time is the primary element. That those things are really bracketed, and then we've got the idea of putting signposts in there, so you know relative to some big event. Was it after the election, or was it after a trip or something like that? So that you've got some big time, some big quote virtual folder there. So.
Let me also explore another couple angles on that. At MIT, they did some studies on letting people do exactly like this, file in more than one place, and they had very favorable results in their user study that the people were quite happy. When you gave the kind of the save as box has to say, click all the spots where you want to file this. Also, our user interface here, so it's a funny thing. We show it as this tree, and it turns out a tree is incredibly flexible for us. So for us, it's like this great debugging tool. We can represent any kind of sort of filtering and narrowing in a tree, and you can see it all at once. But it's probably a real geek UI. What you'll see in nicer looking UIs, like the stuff I've seen one, where you stop seeing it that way as a tree, and you see the different facets, as it were, as they call it, the facets. So, do you want to see the genre of movies and check where it belongs? Do you want to see the director by that way? And it becomes much more natural to sort of see it filed. And you don't show that tree that we're used to meaning folders. So, yeah, this UI is for us to hack on more than to turn loose on the real world.
Right. I mean, there is this notion of self-surveillance, kind of your own personal big brother or Jenny Cam, where you're on 24/7 by 365. And I mean, there's certain things that perhaps you don't want to preserve. Yeah. Whether these are websites that you get to by accident and shouldn't be there, or transactions that you've
you have a special folder for accidental websites.
Automatically put there.
Do you envision a mechanism to just kind of turn it off and say, don't watch me now, or...
Yeah, that's the garbage collecting.
No, but that's going to be a really important thing, is people are, it's going to be a big deal to say, I would like a conversation off camera.
But it's also levels of authorization, basically, that you have inside this thing. That's what you haven't addressed at all yet.
You know what? That's as hard as annotation, because in a sense, think of it as an annotation now. So I said, how hard is it to get you to say anything about this? To get you to say, well, who's allowed to see each bit of stuff in my collection is just this onerous chore. And you're either going to say, well, I live a clean life, make it all public unless I say otherwise, or else you're going to be really paranoid probably and say, oh, no, hide it. And
but there are other security schemes besides Unix, for example, secret, top secret, classified, and the rest of it too, which you can go on and apply to this stuff as well. And it's a real, to make this usable, if you really want to capture every moment there, in fact, capturing moments inside the bathroom is something I want to show general people. Might be just the thing I want to show to my doctor. And it turns out that at the point that as I've gone through this stuff, so it's not capturing it.
We agree.
It's a bad thing. It's just that selective publication is critically important.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, the point is, digitizing it should be a no-brainer. Like if we want to compare, well, I used to have files in my closet here. Well, you could digitize it, put it in your closet, disconnect it from the net, shut the door, and it's better than your paper was and your photos were, because you all can also have it backed up in Nebraska or whatever. So there should be no question about that. Yes to digitization. Now the next question is, do you keep it all together? Do you connect it to the internet at the same time? And those are thornier issues.
Well, and I think a big one is particularly the way companies regard technically I'm sure we've signed something that says all these bits having to do with anything of the project or even anything that comes in that as a business matter is Microsoft property. And so in a way we need something that sort of goes in and pulls out all of those, basically expunges that. So you need an expunge kind of thing. we have to have deniability. I mean, in terms of, I mean, deniability is separate from expunge. I left this environment, and those are your bits, and give them back to me.
Is the microphone still in circulation?
Yeah. Oh, no. Okay.
So the camera's been on you the whole time, and if you did anything embarrassing, it can't be.
And in fact, microphones might help people to be heard within the auditorium, but the microphones we're passing around are unnecessary for actually making a record of this event. So, the floor is open. I guess the next question.
But he's got a microphone. Let us.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
I have two questions. One, have you measured how long it takes to actually collect the data and do the annotations? I agree with you. Having annotation greatly improves the usability of the whole database, right? So how long it takes to collect the data, to do the annotations from?
How long it takes
what's the
to
percentage? What's the percentage of MyLifeBits to collect the data and to do the annotation? And two, the second question. How do you see this evolving in the future?
So the answer to how much time you can spend, it can be awful if you collected it analog originally, wait 30 years like Gordon, have Vicky scan it, then have to look at it and say, what is that? Type things in. When he starts out, there's no support to put the annotation anywhere, so he gets these very long file names. Yeah, you could waste a lot of time on it, but that's where it becomes a lot better is where you get, again, I say it needs to be my personal assistant. So how can the system help me do this? And you know, AI, I hope, comes to the rescue and recognizes things. But on the other hand, once you have MyLifeBits, you can cheat a lot. So I heard a really great paper, actually from Microsoft Research Beijing, about looking at clusters of things and detecting where events are. And I listened to it and said, I got my calendar. I can cheat, you know, and so there's a bunch of related stuff that we can do like that to do inferences, so we can say, well, this is in the calendar. Also, it gets easier in your LifeBits to say, well, there's this recurring cast of characters, right? And so the face recognition gets the feedback from you, and the same thing with voice recognition and so on. So we think there's a lot of hope for getting the system to help you out doing things automatically. Now when you get a digital phone bill, say, even if it's not tagged with XML like we hope it will be, I've seen some really nice research projects starting to automatically extract the metadata and so on. So the answer is it can be a tremendous amount of work, but the more and more we get in digital form, the better the story gets for that.
Future.
The future is it gets better and better. We mark things up. Also, the other thing about the annotation, the time spent is in group events. The wonderful thing with the web or with the internet is that it just takes one keener to benefit everybody. So if there's one person in this crowd tonight who goes really crazy and types all these comments and says all this stuff, they can share it with all of us and we all benefit. So it's not like every single one of us has to do all the work. Or for example, I have this kids sports thing because I'm doing that all the time. If I just say what were the comment on my kid, which I always do, and everybody does that, you have automatic highlight reel in the whole story of the game, right? Where everyone just did a little bit of work. So the kind of collaborative aspect helps you out too.
Same lines as where you see this going, I think you built a fabulous system, and maybe some of the other people might feel the same as me, which is I want it now. And do you see this being one product, several products? Is this going to be built into the operating system of future versions of Windows?
Let's say the group that we interact with the most is the group called Longhorn. And we interact.
And that's the next version of our operating system.
And by the way, there are 8,000 times plus a whole much larger number of CDs out there with that operating system. I won't even say it's in the beta phase. It's a sort of in the alpha test phase. And so the kinds of our goal in this is to have the capability that this can go on. That MyLifeBits will sit on top of. So basically, we interact with those folks to get as much, to make sure that a system like this can be built on the file system, because that's really what's critical. I mean, everybody will look at this a different way. Personally, I look at it as the bare bones of the file system as opposed to the UI, because I happen to like, even though ours looks, I liken it to it. It looks like a 747. It's still a bare bones 747 as opposed to sort of a flowery things. The interfaces are getting out of sight. If you look at some of the media player stuff, I mean, those things are vast in terms of the complexity. I don't know who, I just want to listen to some music. Just get me some stuff here. But so we're bare bones content people, not UI people, frankly, in terms of make it quick and get it to us quick and don't fool around.
But we really feel the operating system is the right place because you want
Yeah.
one unified store. You don't want to look in a whole bunch of applications for your stuff, and you want it to understand all that.
Yeah, it
Let's
has to
take
be
someone new here.
Seems like the operating system is the wrong place to do this because so many of your resources are shared. You would want to have this on a server and have all the people who experience those things with you be able to put their annotations on it and have a social software experience.
Okay, well,
Right.
let me say the file system then. The file, although I don't like the word file anymore, but your storage system, whether it's on a server or what have you, rather than each app having its own little silo, you want it there. And the other thing is like when I do those searches, I want to see email together with images and all that stuff together without launching a different app to see each and so on. So that's why I said operating system, but you know what I mean.
It seems like as you build up your MyLifeBits structure, the linkages between the entities become very valuable. So it also seems that it's important that you are able to share your entities. So how do you deal with linkages when you actually exchange your entities? So
and that's another
plate of spaghetti as
Yeah.
soon as you build something up.
You're absolutely right, and you potentially do want to share that. So if I send you photos of this event and so on with my comments, that could be really good and you could really love it. On the other hand, if I was at the family reunion and I commented on one photo that my aunt looks terrible, I want to be careful whether that annotation goes out to the whole family when I share my photos too. So again, there's this markup problem of indicating what's public, what's private. But once you decide that it's public, it's a personal web, right? With all these little links going around, so that if you grab one thing, how far do you follow these little links to pull this pile of junk out with it?
Covers a little bit. It occurs to me that you're doing ad hoc, what look like ad hoc searches very, very fast. And I know, with traditional database technology, if you're not properly indexed, that doesn't happen. I'm wondering what you're doing under the covers to ensure that the searches, really perform crisply.
Actually, at this stage, we've been pretty lucky so far. We're just starting to run into performance, and most of the stuff is no problem. Like we have indices for all the columns that you might use, so that's fine. The big trouble is the full text, and we find that full text is this black box in the Microsoft implementation we have now, and so once you pass something out to full text, there's nothing to do but wait for all of that to come back before you merge with everything else, and that's a big problem. I think we're going to need to see work in that area of how do you work more efficiently with full text searches.
It looks as if you've embraced and extended the live streams project. The Yale David Galerner's live streams thing. Could you comment on what you've learned from that and the differences? And the second question would be the psychological aspects of how this basically changes your subjectivity over time on your feedback on your identity of yourself.
Well, I'll take the first one while you figure out the answer to the second one. So live streams is great, and we think a time view is, Gordon taught, time's so important, so on. The only objection I have is that it's only one view. So that quote I have from Andy Van Dam is, don't metaphor me in, don't tell me this is the only way of looking at things. So I'd love to have live streams and say, let's sort by time, and we can sort by time, that's great. But it's certainly not the only way that I remember things, and I want to be able to get, we're just getting to the point where we have kind of plugins to this now. And the idea is that we want people to be able to write software and plug in entirely new ways of looking at the collection and getting at it. So,
yeah, I mean,
now
we really didn't come at it from that at all. I mean, as we started talking about it at the very beginning, I was really a bug on wanting the time, essentially these timelines, being able to author timelines so you could put those in place. And then time, particularly us and stuff I've seen, really use time as a major kind of way of finding stuff, because most likely what you want in daily work is something in the last few days. And but it's, you know, I think the more power is really from all of these, essentially all these different columns in the database, of which there are hundreds now. But
right.
when you add, you know, all your contacts, you add, you know, what the lens diameter was on your camera.
So
and
yeah,
where you took time and place and
place. I was going to say, so the
places.
map interface is really cool too. But I wouldn't go overboard saying, oh, I only need a map.
Yeah.
But hold on, there's a second part to the question there. Why did I bring that up again?
Yeah, why'd you bring?
What was that?
I mean, this is a subjective use of software for subjectivity, and I'm wondering how that
you know, you are basically, you know, doing a personal map, a personal network, and that changes one's identity in the way one thinks about oneself and one's past. Memory is identity. How in personal experience, does using this change your way of thinking about yourself, your family, or does it?
Okay, frankly, I haven't really thought specifically about that, how that changes. Is, you know, maybe other than being a little more compulsive about particular events that wanting that may have value over time. I guess none of us have really thought about that. I mean,
I also don't know that we've used it enough yet to
Yeah.
really. We're just beginning. So, like I say, a year.
Yeah.
So
but the features are.
So it was an insight this
it's
summer that
changing.
I thought really was just kind of bells and whistles to have the web pages. I went, no, wait a minute, I'm starting to live differently because of that. And so we're just starting to get that kind of
As we do things in this thing, particularly this issue of facets, we're now sort of into that library part of the world, which is a very musty, dusty place. I said we want to document types. That'll be a key thing to find stuff with. And why isn't there a program out there that builds the Dublin core? I handed a document and it hands me the Dublin core of the thing, which is, by the way, a good product to have. If you want a product out of this whole thing, then just take all this stuff that comes at it, it scans, know what it is, and categorize those. We think that can be done. But incidentally, there are like 250, in my little collection, there are like 250 document types, sort of bills, wills, cards, and then all the credit cards, this kind of, you know, grade cards, greeting cards, you know, Christmas cards.
For those of you who aren't familiar, the Dublin core is a standard, and part of what it would say is that there's attributes that you're after, like the author, the date of publication, and kind of standard metadata. Yeah.
It's metadata, but its document type is a keyword.
On the fly metadata. In your system. You're not stuck with a hierarchy that's pre-built.
No,
That's right in terms of classification. On the other hand, our entities have certain attributes. Now, it's extensible, but that's by the hardcore geek, not by the average person.
But if you say, send me an SBC bill, that comes right off the title of the bill, so we get that pretty nicely now.
I got one at the back here.
How do you approach versioning? So, for example, I might go back and want to see what my schedule was February 1st, but then I might also want to go back and see on January 20th, what did I think my schedule would have been on February 1st, so that I might want to look at February 1st from some time before that date as well as on that date.
So, right, we haven't built anything for that yet, but it gets even worse. For instance, where you have, you know, relationships and you say, well, this is my wife. Well, she wasn't my wife before, and somebody else might have been my wife before, and things change, and what time frame are you dealing with? But let me take the simplest angle of that question in terms of versioning with files. And Ted Nelson, when he did his Xanadu stuff, I thought had some really neat representations for versioning and branching that we want to implement there, so that hopefully you can do a time kind of slider and see all the different versions. But it's another one of these clean living problems. You know, don't clutter everything. I only want the most recent one unless I say otherwise, kind of thing.
Capturing good memories in high fidelity, I'm wondering, what do you do about all the traumatic memories that you capture in high fidelity, and what happens when you come back to them later in life? You know, you find it, you do a search, and all of a sudden there it is, boom, in really high fidelity. Because to some extent, humans' memories, you might even postulate, were designed to fade.
In fact, they were. I gave this talk with a number of psychologists at one place, and they were saying exactly that our ability to get over things has to do with how quickly we can forget details and so on. And they were all speculating on that. Yeah, mine is, but Gordon's isn't.
Yeah. Right.
Can you give us an idea about the hardware setup? I mean, what you need to do all these things, and what the size of storage you have used so far?
Right.
And the last point is, can you repeat the name of the company doing this biosensor? Thank you.
The biosensor?
The biosensor is called Body Media. Body Media. Word.
This notebook.
And that camera up there is called a Deja View camera. So you can go and get it, and it's there. They keep threatening to get it out there. I was the first tester of it. It's got a little thing you hang on your belt, and then these little. It records the audio and video. The last 30 seconds that it saw.
So there's a button which says, instead of having to anticipate and get ready to take the picture, there's a button that says the last 30 seconds was interesting, keep it. And it's running in a circular buffer all the time. It's a neat product. The system, this is a 2 gigahertz machine, but the real factor on it is I/O. So the disk is actually slower than I'd like. I wish I had a faster disk, because whatever 5,400 RPM comes into this. I maxed out with 2 gigs of RAM, because the big secret to getting things to behave well here is to getting as many indices into RAM as you can. So it's mostly a matter of memory and disk bandwidth. But it's certainly not anything special. I mean, this is a notebook. We could easily get something a lot more powerful. But
no, I mean we've got lots of scanners and lots of computers, and the thing that needs to be fast is this, and you can use one any sort of.
Our favorite scanner is a network scanner. So it's an HP, I forget
digital
what.
sender.
And you plop stuff into it. And
yeah, but you have to know somebody to buy it. They don't really sell it. It's good because it's an Ethernet-based scanner. I mean, we think all of this stuff on stuff like that, you want it.
Document or as a bunch of pages like the original?
Oh, as documents.
So it puts them all together.
Yeah, and as a TIFF, a collected TIFF.
It depends on who your elf is doing the work. So Vicky does perfectly what Gordon intends. I don't have the personal assistant. My kids come in. So I have a mixed bag of
stuff.
But it's there. So somebody can write a program 30 years from now to sort out the mixed quality of what I got.
It's on, but I don't think it's.
The microphone is controlled from the auditorium.
That's okay. Yeah, so far you've everything that you've said has been about MyLifeBits, and to me, all of this material is much more collaborative than personal. Like often in a large family, it would be our LifeBits. Have you thought about how this would apply to, say, a whole family, where you have maybe 5 people in a family contributing? It sort of goes along with the security or privilege questions. Because I have, we have boxes, but they're family photos.
Yeah, right.
It's family music. It's family.
I think in use that a machine, there's a machine that drives a plasma. I have a media center which has got 3/4 of a terabyte on it now, which has a few. It's sort of my sneaker net stuff that I got from the lab, and it's got all the photos that are on the file system, but that's not running the system. But yet that's a public one to capture stuff. I think at some point all this things have to get integrated. I mean, Jim is a better candidate, I think, for that. Particularly when a lot of well, you've probably got 3 or 4 computers there, and just bringing that.
It's a big problem if you have the answer, because the scenario I want to address next is my photo screensaver is running in my living room, and all my family's there, and anyone can make a comment. And so what comes up on the screensaver? Is it the shared stuff? Is it stuff relevant? I mean, so there's even identifying who's involved, which I don't think we can get right yet, unless I make my kids wear little badges or RFID my kids.
The second part of that too is having lost your hard drive for that short amount of time. Also, if you lose your laptop, one of those things is portability. You want to show all your pictures and your music and your web pages to everybody, everywhere you go. So if you don't have your laptop, have that device, have you thought about just being able to always have access to all of that data that is your life everywhere?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, we're not going to be able to fit it on a notebook, right? So there's some server, and you sync, and you have. Well,
we're in a race now with the storage people, but I'm kind of out of storage right now. But I only have.
The dirty little secret is he's using less than 40 gigs worth of data, but those darn apps.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty bad. And, yeah, in fact, I just had we didn't show you a thumbnail. Roger came in and says, gee, I've got this new feature. It's called a variable thumbnail. You want to really see what the thumbnail looks like. Do you have one of those?
Yeah, I can
It's beautiful. But it turns out, gee, I did all my thumbnails. It took, I think, a day to do them. I said, suddenly 2 more gigabytes just went down the drain.
These are our big thumbs of our pages so that you can actually really see what's on.
Boy, is that nice, though. You can read them. How about thumbnails you can actually read?
Bad news is the thumb takes as much space as the page does. So that's what Gordon just blew 2 gigs on thumbnails is what he's complaining about.
But and Roger said, of course it's worth it. And I said, yeah, isn't technology wonderful? Yes.
Just want to say, we have time.
Yeah, let's.
2 more questions.
Yeah, we're.
So.
I've got a question, Gordon. You mentioned you had 3/4 of a terabyte on your media center PC at home.
Yeah.
I've got a similar setup there now, and I've got about 30,000 JPEGs and about 65,000 MP3s. The system is taxed, and like right now, trying to pull up music lists and picture slideshows and things like that. Is there anything that can be done today to improve the speed of lessons?
Database. You need indices. You need B-trees. You need all that good stuff the database guys have been doing too. We always say if Google can bring up the page that fast, why can't we? Well, of course they have a big farm on it, but the principle.
The media center product, I don't know, is from an end user standpoint. I'm not sure that's something that can be built in.
Yeah, so the media center doesn't address it. So Gordon's just saying he's using media center to play his TV and all this kind of stuff. And as far as the storage and everything else, when he hits all those shows, actually that's a real problem. This is part of why I said we wanted to see what's it like to record 2 terabytes worth of TV shows. Is that clunky little on-screen TV thing is really hard to deal with. It's almost like you need to go over to your PC and kind of narrow it down to a couple of thousand things, before you throw it on the TV screen. It's tough. But in terms of your speed, you need those database features. That's what's going to make it happen.
Before we get the last question, first of all, I want to remind you that next month here, our speaker will be Bill Coleman talking about the next big thing. I also want to remind you that for the first 100 people to go to Member Appreciation Day tomorrow after 3 o'clock, you get a CD with audio of, I know it's Jim Gray's talk is on there, Stephen Wolfram's talk. I'm not sure who the others are. The staff has just put this together. And I want to thank very much our speakers this evening, Jim and Gordon, for this fascinating talk. I wish we had time to sort of go on with the question and answer for quite a while longer. But it's just been an eye-opener. So thank you very much.
You pick.
You pick.
You gotta be the nasty here, right?
Oh, I'm good at this.
So, have you ever considered some of the capitalistic aspects of this? Because I'd probably pay good money to have Gordon Bell's thoughts on, or his little collection of thoughts on the future of networking, future of whatever.
No, I don't actually. That's a good.
Bring
point.
your checkbook on down.
We send money in all forms, but that's a good idea. I mean, in terms of, but it's in a way it's a little like these advisors that there's people in an advisor network, and so people could. Once you've got this, then maybe that this is a, let's call it a web services or .NET product, which is, hey, I want to go query your system, and then and whether or not I want to let you have that or not, but at least that ability could be there.
The corporate.
I have a few memo. I mean, you can look at my website. And there's a bunch of things like I point people at it on the VAX. The VAX strategy is on there, and somebody from Microsoft recently said, "Hey, they said, we can't believe you talked about the VAX strategy on your website." And I said, "Wait a minute. The thing was it was written in 1979. Do you think any, is that a?" I said, "What I use it for is when people talk about strategy, all business people, all they can talk about is strategy. Here's actually a strategy, and it worked. Wrote it down, called it a strategy. This is what the company did. Then they tanked too. They ran out of the runway on the strategy, but that wasn't my problem." But
just for fun to close here, I have a couple of things out of Gordon's collection, and his is really fun to troll. Here's a letter, him writing to Rick Rashid, who is our senior vice president in charge of MSR, saying, "Please come and start something called Microsoft Research." So there's all kinds of cool things to go after.